Hey, this is McGrew again. I'm here with another video about a little bit of fabrication, a little bit of update on what's going on with my Daihatsu F73 rugger, Fourtrak, whatever you want to call it, Rocky. Today in particular, I'm going to go over what I'm planning on doing with the bumper setup. The rear bumper has been modified a number of times now. Part of that is due to the fact that the tail lights in the bumper are very much like the tail lights that are in the Daihatsu Rocky that was known in the US, or the Feroce as it's called, or Fourtrak as it's known in Europe. And what happens is, after a certain year model, they put all the lights in the bumper itself, which is kind of low sitting, and it's really susceptible to being cracked and broken by things such as rocks and that kind of stuff. And that's what happened to mine. Even though mine is a Fourtrak, it has that same setup where the bumper in the rear is actually two separate pieces. And in those two separate pieces, it has one light assembly that's for reverse, and then another light assembly that's for tail lights, brake lights, and then of course turn lights, turn signals. So over time those broke, and I just haven't been able to really find them here in Chile that are of any good quality. So what I did was I took the original bumpers off, I fabricated up a bumper, I modified it. I was going to make it more like an ARB style bumper. Then I decided that I didn't like that idea, so I modified it again, and now I'm going back to use the factory bumpers because, well, at this point I don't know if I'm going to keep the truck or not. Probably not. So I'm just planning on repairing it, making it look decent, not decent but as best I can, and then sell it probably. So today I'm going to show you a little bit about the bumper setup, how it is, what I have to work with to begin with, and then I'll go over what it is that I'm doing to kind of help make that work for what I need. And so next I'll be showing you the bumper and explaining a little bit about the bumper. Okay, so here on the table in front of us we have the factory bumper from the Rocky Rugger Fourtrak F73, whatever you want to call it, from Daihatsu. And this point here is the point that's closest to the outside of the truck. This is where a cap goes, and it wraps around the side of the bottom of the back quarter panel. And this portion here cuts off just between, just in the center of the door, and there's a space where there's a trailer hitch mount, and then the other one starts over here and goes on. So what we have here is the reverse light, and then here you would have the turn signal and the tail brake light that goes right here. And so what I've planned on doing is I've planned on using this light here, because this light here was a light that came out of the last version of the bumper that I had on the Rocky. And even though I plan on using this these components, I'm not going to just put it in there like it is, because, well, clearly it doesn't fit the way that it needs to fit, and it won't look very good. So that's not my goal in this. My goal is to make it fit well and to make it look as best as possible. So what I've done is I've taken the light apart, and I have these covers here, and my goal is to make them fit like this inside there, and have my turn signal and of course my brake lights there. Now what happens is that there's a couple of factors that we have to keep in mind here while we're doing this. One, first off, is that the corners are rounded, and that there is a lip here on the top and on the bottom that we have to keep in mind. And I would prefer not to cut these, because if somebody found a light assembly, they could change it out for that light assembly if they wanted to in the future. But another factor is this tab here and these two mounting holes here on this tab are at different heights in dimension. This one's shallower and this one's much deeper. So when you're fabricating something up, you have to keep all of this in mind and make sure that it will fit the way that you want it to. So my plan is the following. This is just a piece of steel that I found. It's not the piece that I'm going to use, but it's something that can give an idea. Plan on putting a plate of steel in there, like so. Clearly, it'll be cleaned up. It won't be rusty. It'll be better shaped, and it'll fit closer to the edges. And then mount these as such onto the plate with the light fixtures behind them, of course, so that they light up and they work as this will be the turn signal and this will be the brake. Clearly, these aren't the caps that I'll use, but they're just for an example at the moment. So how do you go about getting this information to do it? Well, there's two ways you can do it. One is that you could just measure out the distance from here and the distance from here, which I'll probably do as well. Another is to do this, which in fabrication work is very, very common. It's just taking a piece of cardboard or a piece of card stock and then masonite, something like that, and then you can put it over the hole, and mine was about like that, and then from the bottom take a pencil, and from the bottom hold down, and then you can trace. And as you do that, it gives you a semblance of what it is. You can see that some of the lines don't connect completely, but it's not the end of the world because you can draw those in, and then with a box cutter or an X-Acto knife you can cut it out, always leaving a little bit extra so that you can make a template on a piece of steel. You can cut that out, and then if you leave it a little bit bigger than you need, you can always go down and sand it, grind it, cut it down, but you can't really add easily. I mean, with steel you can weld and things, but it is a hard task. So the next step would really be for us to get this transferred over to a piece of steel, make sure the steel is clean, cut the steel, and then we can start mounting the stuff from there, and that's what we'll start to do. As you can see, I'm using this scrap piece of metal that has some surface rust on it. It's quite a bit, but it's not pitted, so it's still solid sheet. Plus, for the use that we have intended for these lights, it's not going to cause any negative effect if it is a little bit pitted, but I'll sand it all down and then I'll refinish it before putting the lights on and before putting it in the bumper. But what I have here now is I have it drawn out with a square using the most of the space that I have available so that I can get the best use out of this material possible. And so now that I have it actually drawn out, I'll go back with an angle grinder, I'll cut it, and then I'll have the base platform for what I'm going to use. I changed the design a little bit. I didn't use the actual cutout of the actual cardboard copy. I decided to go with it with a little bit different idea, and I'll show you what that is as I get into it. But you can see that it's just basically a rectangle, and I'll start making relief cuts and drill the holes as needed once I get that done. Okay, so sorry the lighting's not the best here where I'm at, but just wanted to let you know that I just finished cutting out. As you saw, I was cutting the steel pieces here that I'm going to use. I have both of them in my hands. If you notice, I have safety glasses and a shield on, and that's because I have tried using just the shield and the safety glasses separate, but I've been to the emergency room or the eye doctor about 5 times now. Just an idea, make sure you keep that stuff really protected, your eyes. Make sure you use gloves. You know, you need to make sure you use common sense and some safety equipment as well. But as you can see, I just cut them out. It took, in real lifetime, it took about 6 minutes. I'm here with the piece that's going to go into the bumper with the lights mounted on it so that I can have the brake and the corner lights. They're going to go approximately like that. But the idea, of course, is that this plate doesn't sit flush, but actually sits recessed down inside it, more like that, of course. So as you can tell, just for me trying to get it in there, it's pretty close to fitting the way that it should. Some people may not know what to do to make it fit and refine it, so I'm going to go through that process a little bit right now. Once again, I'm cutting with an angle grinder, and my goal is typically to try to keep it as straight as possible. Now, if it's not going to be seen, sometimes I don't worry as much about it, but in this case, I want it to be pretty straight. So I've clearly got some things to work on to make sure it's flush. But there's also another aspect to fabricating that you need to keep in mind. One of the aspects is the perception of eye to what is straight is based on tonal changes in color and angles. So that means that sometimes, because you can sand, in this case rust away, it may look like it's not straight when in fact it's more straight than it looks, or because it has a bevel to it, it may look a little bit more crooked than it really is. Best way to test that is flat surfaces and squares, and I use those a lot. In fact, I have a little square right here that I'm using. It does the job pretty well. You just have to remember to use it and be patient. So to make this fit inside, I can see that there's some gaps here and there, and then of course here there are gaps. So those can't be my problem because they're already not touching. So what is my problem? Well, from what I can tell on this one, I have a little bit to take off here in this corner, and I just mark it with a pencil to know. I'll have to go back and adjust it to the amount to take off as I think is necessary in the end. On this side I can tell there's a little bit of a space, so that's not an issue. Here I can tell that it needs to come off right there, not all the way down. There's a little bit of space here and a little bit of space there. And then of course here there's a space. So the problem has to be from here, because I can see that there's a gap there. And when I'm marking, I try to indicate how much more or less I think I should take off. So you'll see that my line gets closer and further away from the edge as I go. So that you guys understand what I'm doing, I'm actually not cutting now, I'm sanding. To get the finished rounded edges and take off the burrs and stuff, I use flap wheels more than anything. I love these things. I have all different grades. I have from 40 up to 80. I have had a couple of 120s before, but I find that they melt down a little too quick, so I don't use those. And from time to time, I will also use a circular sanding pad like this here, which has a plastic disc and then it has a sanding disc that goes on top of it. These, however, are good for rough sanding and stuff like that, but not for finish sanding, because it's real easy to push the edge into it and make gouges in the metal. And I also use these on wood, but the same thing. Have to be careful that you don't gouge out the material. So now I'm going to go back to the angle grinder. Going to hopefully touch this up real quick and then drop it down in there, show you guys how it looks, and then once that's done, I'll do the other one, and these two will be ready to put in there, and then I can start sanding the actual metal down. I can make sure that all the mounting holes are where they should be, and then I can also make sure that I have a way of fitting the lights to these so that I can fit these on top afterwards. So that's the idea. It's not a real quick process. It takes a few hours to do this, and honestly it'll take me about a day to do both of these, just because I'm trying to go slowly and do it right. But once I get this one done with all these measurements, then I have a template. All I have to do is mark the other one out by this one, trim off by cutting what is clearly excess, and then I can trim it down from there with the sanding disc. So really fabrication is kind of a little bit of sculpting, and so you need to cut the rough off quickly, but then you need to smooth out what's left over and try to make it as pretty as possible. So as I continue to progress, I'll show you some other stuff, and then we'll continue to go on until these are done and mounted on the Jeep. Thanks for stopping by. Don't forget to stop by my videos. Make sure you come by my blog, which is beginnersfab.blogspot.com, and also you can check out through that blog all of my videos on YouTube as well.